the March 9th Planning Commission meeting. Just a couple of things. We are broadcasting live on local channel 27 and the Pacific Coast TV's website for those viewing out in the public. We do have, it looks like, a community member so far in attendance. So if you would like to speak, you're welcome to. We do have opportunity for public comment during the general public comment, and then under each item, if anyone chooses to speak. There's a 3-minute speaking period. You can hit *6 to raise and unraise your hand if you're on phone, and *9 to mute and unmute. And then we did not have any memos that went out today. We did have a revision to minutes, which we did republish onto our city's website agenda. And we did send a revised copy to each planning commissioner. And with that, I thank you for your patience with this remote meeting process, and I will hand over the speaker here to Chair Ruddick to officially start.
Thank you so much, Bridget. I will open the March 9th, 2021 meeting of the Half Moon Bay Planning Commission and invite everybody to join me in rising and doing the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, undivided with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Bridget, would you like to conduct a roll call, please?
Sure. Commissioner Benjamin?
I am here.
Commissioner Gorn?
Here.
Commissioner Hernandez?
I am present.
Vice Chair Polgar?
Here.
And Chair Ruddick?
Here.
All commissioners are present this evening.
And this brings us to consideration of the minutes of our last meeting, February 23rd. Do any commissioners have comments, or Commissioner Benjamin's hand is up?
Thank you. Yeah, I just, in the discussion of STRs, there was a reference in the notes. I don't think it was wrong, but I just wanted to be sure it was clear where there was a point that we were concerned in the notes that the STR ordinance, we did not think that it was had an adverse impact on property rights. And the language was kind of neutral about whether we thought it did or not. And I think that my sense of the conversation at the Planning Commission was that in the state that the draft ordinance was in, it did not do that. And I just thought I ought to clarify that. Otherwise, I was fine with it. Thank you.
Are you thinking any edits to the minutes, or your statement just now will serve to clarify that?
I'm sorry. Let me lower my hand. I would just strike the need to address. So yeah, let me make that a motion. I move that we approve the minutes of that meeting with the amendment that we strike the words "need to address" before STR regs don't interfere with property rights.
Okay, I follow that. Commissioner Benjamin has made that motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Polgar. I guess we'll have a roll call on that, please, Bridget.
Yes. Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes.
Commissioner Gorn?
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez?
I need to abstain. I was not present for that meeting.
Correct. Vice Chair Polgar?
Yes.
And Chair Ruddick?
Yes.
4-0.
Now, I guess to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy whether that motion approved the minutes with that addition, or do we need a second motion to approve?
Through the chair, my motion was to approve.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Benjamin. Good. Well, that brings us to the point in our meeting where we invite public comment from any members of the public. Those attending the meeting online are welcome to speak to the commission about anything whatsoever other than the agendized items that come immediately after this. So if you'd like to speak, please raise your hand and Bridget will usher you into the panel.
I see no one raising their hand.
All right, then we won't
Oh,
open.
we do have one person. Let me leave this. Go ahead and state your name. Oops, I'm sorry, I muted you. And there
Hello,
you go.
good evening. This is Maha Vartanyans and my husband Harmik Vartanyans. We are interested in an update on the ADU applications. If that can be added to your agenda tonight, that would be very much appreciated. But specifically about the Measure D allocations.
Right, we understand.
Thank you.
The open government laws do not allow us to add something to tonight's agenda because it has to be noticed in advance of the meeting. But I'm certain Director Ekus can, I'm certain, guide you as to how to get the information you like from City Hall.
Sure. Just to very briefly, without going off agenda, Commission will see that item at your next meeting, which is March 23rd. We are finishing up the rankings. We wanted them here tonight, but they're not ready. I was going to give you an update on this in our report at the end of the meeting, but since you have public interest, I think it's fair to just share that now. As soon as we've finalized our rankings, we're going to contact all of the applicants, and there are quite a few, so it'll take us a little bit of time. And we will be doing that probably early next week.
Great.
I do have one other public comment. I have Tim Pond.
Hi, my
Welcome,
name's
Tim.
Tim, and I also want to speak to the ADU and the JDU matter. JDUs weren't even invented when Measure D was written, and yet you guys are qualifying those as a full housing unit. At most, one or two people can occupy a JDU, which is attached to the house with a door, and reasonably can be converted back into part of the house. I don't think it's fair to charge, and Measure D stipulates that it's to control population growth by 1%. By including these in your Measure Ds, and by including actually ADUs in general, I think you're dropping the growth of Half Moon Bay below 1%. And if you do like a quick study on how many of these units are comprising the building permits for new housing in Half Moon Bay, I think you'll find that well over 50% of the housing units are extremely small units that are housing one or two people. And therefore, your Measure D, which is supposed to control population at 1%, is probably doing far better than that and pushing it below 1%. And the actual number of units is not controlled by the measure language. The population, and all it says is that, and I've read it a few times, I'm sure you all have, it says that, you're supposed to consider the census in determining the number of units. I don't know if there's a straight division that's done, but I just don't think it's fair. And I don't think to include JDUs in particular and accessory dwelling units in general as full housing units in the calculation. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you for
Thank
those
you.
remarks, Tim.
I have no one else.
All right, I'll close the public hearing or the public comment section and move to the first item on our public hearing items, the 2020 housing element update. Is that for you, Joe?
Indeed it is. Thank you. Are you able to see the screen?
Yes.
Yes, I see it well.
Great. All right. Good evening, Chair Reddick and Commission. This is your annual acknowledgement of the Housing Element Annual Progress Report. We often refer to it as the APR. You see this every year in February or March. It is due to the Department of Housing and Community Development by April 1st. And the next stop for this report is City Council, and we'll be taking it to them next week. It's the forms that you have, the report itself is all on the format for HCD. So I know that some of those sections get a little bit hard to read. You might do better looking at it on the online version. I don't know if you all printed it. But we like to give you just a quick upshot on what's in the report this year and trends that we see and next steps for housing, just in brief, and we're happy to field any questions. We note a trend that we're seeing here from at least 2019 to 2020. We'll go back a couple more years to bolster what this is really looking like. But what you can see here from these 4 different milestone points, and these are the 4 points that HCD is looking at, is the time that applications are submitted to have a coastal development permit, or if they don't need one, straight into building permit. When the entitlement itself is granted, so that could be a planning commission approval. When the building permit is issued, and then when certificates of occupancy or a final walkthrough and then allowance to occupy has been done by our building inspector. And I think what you'll see here, what staff is noting, is a lot more pipeline projects, and a lot of these are ADUs. We didn't have as many finals this year, and we're not exactly sure why. Sometimes things get kind of straddle the year in terms of when they're going to wrap up. But you can see that the number of applications has built up a bit since 2019, and we're going to be doing a bit more looking at that over a longer period of time. We also note that COVID had an effect on how quickly projects were getting done. There were several months or a couple months where construction of non-essential projects was halted. So we do have some slower build outs going on. So that could also contribute to this drop from 18 to 12. But we're, as I said already, we're going to look at Measure D applications in 2 weeks. And I think you'll see that evening how that may come into play for 2021. Let's move on to what is really at the nut of this report, which is trying to get affordable housing developed. And your housing element is it's the city's playbook for implementing policies to accomplish that. It's been pretty tough in the last few years because we have not had a nonprofit developer come forward, despite our efforts to reach out to a number of nonprofit affordable housing developers. Usually units in the very low and low income categories come from those types of projects, like what you have down at the south end of Main Street. Those were units that were counted in previous cycles. We have picked up the pace in moderate units. We've been categorizing ADUs as affordable at moderate level, which is below market rate for the county, for San Mateo County. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute here. And you can see we're picking away at our 240 total units, which is what our regional housing needs allocation has been in what we're calling cycle 5 of your housing element. And we refer to that as RENA. Now, a couple things that we think may change in this particular reporting for this housing element. We're noticing some of the ADU rental rates are actually lower than that moderate category where we've been classifying them. In fact, we think some of them are in the low income category. There's going to be a rent study coming up through the 21 Elements group. This is the group that supports all the jurisdictions in San Mateo County with their housing elements. And we actually have grant funding from HCD, and we pay into this group to support our housing element work. And they're underway with a rent study. If we find that rents are lower than we anticipated, and we can back it up with documentation, we'll be able to reclassify some of the ADU development into a lower income category, which would be really a good thing for our submittal to HCD and for the performance of this housing element. The other significant thing that happened at the end of 2020 was San Mateo County's purchase of the Coastside Inn. This was a purchase made with CARES Act funding. It was called Project Home Key. And those purchases were exempt from zoning requirements, the general plan consistency statements that Planning Commission would normally make with public procurement of properties. They are also exempt from any discretionary permits. City Council, being very, very sensitive about the significance of this purchase and the use of the property as a shelter, held 2 study sessions, and it has had staff very actively engaged in working with our county colleagues on the operations of the shelter and the kinds of agreements that go into it for the provider. We note that Coastside Inn has 52 rooms. San Mateo County purchased hotels in some other jurisdictions, and in some cases, those hotel rooms have kitchenettes, and those other jurisdictions are able to count these purchases against their RENA in these very low and low categories because they have kitchens, and they're actually then qualify as a housing unit. Without a kitchen, they do not qualify yet as a housing unit. But that doesn't mean that that's ruled out going forward. You know, it's early days for the county operating this facility, and we're going to really participate with them to see what their target population's needs are for the kind of housing that they're bringing them into for sheltering and transitional living, and before they may be able to move on into some other kinds of housing. So we would be surprised if some of these units had kitchens put into them later, or maybe even were combined a couple rooms together into a larger unit. There's all kinds of configurations that could happen there. And this purchase could become a really important part of the provision of affordable housing in Half Moon Bay during this particular housing element cycle. And so it's coming at the city from a different direction than the way these usually occur. We have other projects in the pipeline. There's a mixed use project, Main and Kelly, that has 6 units over some commercial development. We have a few single family homes underway. And then of course, your Measure D recipients, we have 22 allocations available outside of downtown. We have just over 30 applications for those allocations. Most of them are for ADUs. We will fully address the junior ADU comment that you heard earlier this evening in a couple weeks, and I think that will clear that up. But we just wanted tonight to show you where we are, and you see the flow come through the commission. A lot of the projects that you've had your hands on end up on those tables, and you can watch how they wind their way through the process. those were the highlights that staff wanted to present tonight. You really don't have an action per se. This is a perfunctory report. And we're really restricted in terms of specifically what we can report out on. There is a sheet about the housing element programs, and we do like to update that every year. You'll note that we highlight that shelter purchase. We definitely highlight the land use plan adoption by City Council. And a really important thing that happened last year, Planning Commission worked on it in, I think, late 2019. City Council approved the mixed use districts and parking standards ordinance. That was a really important ordinance for downtown and the mixed use districts, and it enabled a number of our applicants to come forward with projects that you've been seeing. That was certified by the Coastal Commission in May, so we get to count that as a really important zoning amendment towards this housing element, and we're really happy to be able to do that one. If anyone has questions, I'm happy to take them, and thank you for receiving this report.
Thank you, Jill. Commissioner Benjamin has his hand up.
Yes, thank you. That was actually a great report. I mean, maybe we don't have to take action to approve, but it felt more than perfunctory to me. I really appreciated having it. And I wanted to touch on you've answered a lot of my questions about ADUs, JADUs, and the emergency housing in the report. So it was almost like you read our minds. But I wanted to touch on your question about, or your reference to, it would look better for our performance, because that raised the question for me of getting clarity of what it means for the city to perform versus the achievement of housing on the ground. My sense, and to be clear, this is not me opposing housing elements or housing, this is trying to understand the mechanics. My understanding is that our job is to make sure we have provided adequately zoned land and we have dealt with barriers that kept affordable housing from going forward. But if we see a small lot, even a very small lot, and someone decides to put a bigger house on it, that's not on us. In other words, at some point, it becomes the property owner's decision about whether to provide housing and what the value of that housing is with respect to median income will be. So when we talk about the city's performance as it's perceived by the Housing and Community Development Agency, it would be helpful, I think, for maybe other commissioners, but certainly for me, to understand the performance with respect to housing production versus the performance of, yes, city, you're doing a good job of making the road easy for someone who may or may not wish to build housing.
Through the chair, just a couple notes, and then I'll try to answer that or add to the discussion a little bit. We are going to want you to make a motion in a second and acknowledge that you did receive this. You do have a public comment, and you're more than, of course, we'd like you to take public comment on this item. I'll go ahead and give a little feedback on this first vein of thinking about this.
Just as a point of order, if this is a public hearing item, my comment might not be appropriate until we've heard public testimony. I'm happy to do it either way.
It's not a hearing. It's just a business item, and you're acknowledging this. You can do it in either order. I don't think it's a significant procedural issue for this particular item.
Thank you.
So both of those things matter, Commission. Having a reduction in barriers, at least an analysis of what are the roadblocks to producing affordable housing. For example, the most significant roadblock that we know of for producing affordable housing in Half Moon Bay is the water connection challenge. That's a really, really big deal. if those affordable housing water connections cannot be used, which are about $16,000 a pop, and the $100,000 connections, or however much they are in the secondary market, there's not going to be any affordable housing with those connections. That's or very, very little. That would be really, really challenging. So barriers, reducing barriers, trying to find them, assess them, taking the feedback from the community. We're hearing feedback tonight at the beginning of your meeting, concern about Measure D and how it's processed. That's an interesting part of the Half Moon Bay dynamic. So yes, there's that. And in the past, previous cycles, really being able to demonstrate that there were adequate sites and that processes were clear and consistent with objective standards, and staff was trained and able to click things through and meet all the requirements of things like the Permit Streamlining Act. It wasn't enough, but it was good, and it was satisfied on the requirements for housing element certification and then updating to the next one. Over the last cycle or two, the screws are really turning tighter on production. Production matters, and it isn't just reducing barriers. We actually do need to produce units. So it is both, and the question of, well, what happens if you don't? Well, I'm worried that we're going to find that out, because we're really having a hard time in the very low and the low income categories, which is why I presented those two a little bit more tonight than normal, and showed you a few paths that we're working on to try to populate that part of the table that we have such a hard time with. So we're happy to bring you more on this, but I think we should maybe take public comment. I would like to speak again at the end of your item about what's to come with the next housing element, because we're about to start it, so we can discuss that a little bit.
Thank you, Jill. I know Commissioner Hernandez, you've had your hand up for a few minutes, but would you be okay with hearing comment from the public before? Okay, then I'll open public hearing for that. I apologize. I've dropped off of Zoom for about 5 seconds twice in the last few minutes. So if I did hear, matters my part.
You're freezing up a little.
Bridget,
okay.
do we have a member of the public who?
We do. We have Tim Pond will be able to talk here in just a moment.
Thank you.
I actually didn't raise my hand, but.
Oh, your hand was raised, so I'm sorry.
Sorry, I didn't mean to raise my hand.
It's okay. I'll put you on mute. No worries.
I'll call on Commissioner Hernandez in that case and close the public hearing.
As always, thank you. I've heard a few of these presentations over the years, but just to go back to the main point, so the viewers at home can follow the plot without putting words directly in your mouth. Production matters. And if we were to, this is a clarifying question, if we were to measure production, we would be failing to fulfill our obligations at the bottom end of the production requirement. And the hotel project could actually be a mechanism for us to efficiently satisfy that production requirement. Is that a fair way to summarize the situation? Jill?
I think that's fair. Yeah, there's potential there to really support those affordability levels that we've been trying to fill.
Without having to build 200 apartments.
That is also true.
Great, thank you.
Questions or comments from other commissioners? Commissioner Benjamin.
I wanted to give the other colleagues a chance. I didn't mean to jump ahead if anybody else wanted to talk, Steve.
I don't see any
Commis-
other peers' hands up.
Commissioner Gorn has his hand up as well.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Hey there.
Sorry, David.
So I know that transitional housing for the homeless is, there's quite a few of them. I know there's some in the Bay Area as well, but a ton of them in Southern California. And my understanding is that they do count, whether they have kitchens or not. And that was one of the selling points of having transitional housing in those. A lot of them were hotels, motels that were converted into transitional housing. So I'm pretty sure I can check with people down, in some of those. I mean, I know that's your job, but
We can respond to that.
I'm pretty sure the transitional housing counts. It does lead me to my other question: is do any of these units at Cosedian have kitchens now? That's my question.
Okay, so two things there through the chair. First of all, none of the Coastside Inn units have kitchens. We had hoped that some of them did, and we would have counted them. We conferred with HCD, and we are also working with our 21 Elements folks, and we also coordinated with San Mateo County Department of Housing and the other cities who have had legal advice regarding the shelter purchases in their jurisdictions, as well as our own Shoot Mahali regarding the shelter purchase in our jurisdiction. And in terms of RENA units, those do not count. Yes, transitional housing and supportive housing projects count towards supporting homeless and other populations, but they count in different ways. So what you'll notice that we did in our reporting, we wanted to show it because it's such a significant, frankly, accomplishment that City Council supported. And there is a table in the report, and I think it's table F. Give me a sec. And we counted these as units that we can't attribute to our RENA, just so that they are at least in our record for this year. And then if we're able to get some kitchens in them, this is the table where we're talking about acquisitions and having, which is really a significant thing when a public agency acquires development like this and puts it into affordable housing. So this is any acquisition with affordable units actually has to get pre-approved by HCD. They won't even unlock the spreadsheet for us to count units in those categories until they have confirmed that they pass muster for that. So we put them in the part of the spreadsheet where they fit, which is they are units that don't count towards RENA, and we're tracking them. So I do want to reassure you, Commissioner Gorn, this we went every way on how to get these into our housing element report. We take this really seriously. Sarah Clark, who you've been seeing recently in your meetings on the STR ordinance, is one of Shoot Mahali's housing specialist attorneys, and she reviews our APR. She's read it for probably the last 3 or 4 years now, and once we had done our data work, we ran everything through her. So I think what I'm lacking for you tonight is a better explanation about how transitional and supportive housing are actually counted, and we could bring that back to you.
Oh, that's fine.
Okay.
I may just talk to a few people too to come, because I do know about RENA, and I am pretty sure that they have counted, but that also may have been in the past and not now. So I don't know.
Commissioner Benjamin, please.
Yes, thank you. So one other, one of the things that jumped out at me and perhaps at you as well when I read the spreadsheets was all of that big lump of housing that was heading through the pipeline that was above moderate, was in the category of the most expensive housing, right? And it left me feeling like, in most of those cases, those projects probably went through us or it went through Jill at one of the community development director hearings. And sometimes projects come to us, and I'm speaking generally, not about any particular project. Sometimes projects come to us that might be associated with a challenging lot, but the applicant would seek some kind of variance or other approach that would allow a home that, if our zoning ordinance were applied strictly, would produce a smaller development that might well be in a different category, possibly moderate income or even below low income. And as a result of our decision making to grant or not grant, we have a chance to influence the kinds of housing that we are producing. And my question, and I don't expect an answer off the cuff, maybe there is one, but is if we were to, in considering future requests for variances or whatnot on those challenging lots, if we were to say, well, if we make one decision, we get housing in one category. If we make a different decision, we get housing in a different category. If our housing element is driving us towards getting production, that is, if, to quote you, production matters, does that become a compelling consideration for the Planning Commission when we consider variances? Because it has not been.
There's an awful lot of nuance there without having examples. One thing I can share with you is the way your density bonus ordinance works. You're to have an ordinance that addresses projects that may come in. This is multifamily development where a developer proposes to develop more units than the site could have per the base density, and make some of them affordable, and it's all per a formula in the code, and then would be granted supportive measures that are benefits back to the developer, like setback reductions or some other development standards that could be relaxed for that trade-off. So the idea of what you're talking about is actually coded at the state law level. We try to implement the state density bonus law in our code. With what you're talking about here with single family, I think I would like to do more thinking about that. It's difficult because the variance is not it's not about use. It's about the land and what it can produce. Size, shape, topography, location, and surroundings are the environment for variances. And so we'd have to think about that a little bit more. It isn't that we'd be opposed to the notion. It's very interesting. I do want to note something back on that table where you were looking at the above moderate units. And if you don't mind, I'm going to pop that back up real quick. So just to set a little context for where these 67 units came from, a couple key developments produced 26 of those. So the 19 units at Pacific Ridge are part of that. that were developed with phase 1 of Pacific Ridge during this housing element period. Also the, I think 7 or 8 units down at Carnoustie are, which you saw a year and a half ago or so, are also included in that number. So the rest of them are infill here and there, usually one at a time, but there were a couple projects that consumed a bit of that. So that's what you're seeing there.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Benjamin, for interesting point of view, and Jill for your responses. Do other Vice Chair Polgar, I see your hand up.
Hi, yes, so and I'll first of all apologize because my connection's been a little bit rough, so I may have missed certain things that were said. It clicked off and on for a little bit. One thing that I wanted to understand is we've been talking about kind of we need to have production. And what are the ramifications of, you mentioned the kind of the tightening of the screws, and what do you mean by that in terms of like the implications for the city in missing certain deadlines or kind of thresholds?
I think we should bring this back with a housing element meeting with Sarah. But one of the things that's already happening is we're looking at cycle 6 RENA being quite a bit higher than it had been. We aren't the only city. All of the Bay Area had their numbers ramped up, but ours are being proportionally raised in the very low and low income categories because we haven't produced. And we also have a need. Half Moon Bay has a population that needs that housing. So it's a match. We're anticipating the RENA to be well within what Measure D would allow. And we clearly, and you know, we talked about this many, many times with the land use plan update, we tried to plan for several rounds of RENA because the land use plan is going to eclipse many housing elements, at least two, maybe 3. So a lot of thinking has gone on into how to accommodate this and be prepared for what may happen with this. Some of the things going on though at the state level are requirements for cities to simply process applications that are objectively in compliance with the zoning standards, and they're not discretionary, they get approved.
Is that, sorry, one question, is that are you referring to a certain tier of RENA or is that at any?
It's it can be a mix. Winter's she's done research on this for us actually, so she can dig right in.
Yeah, through the chair. I think this is related to some of the questions about consequences in connection with RENA. Half Moon Bay is in the coastal zone, and so not all of the new state housing legislation applies to you in the same way it applies to other jurisdictions. And one of the big examples of that is what we call SB 35, which was kind of one of the early blockbuster housing statutes back in 2017 that basically categorized jurisdictions into those that were making sufficient progress toward their RENA numbers and those that weren't. And depending on where a jurisdiction was falling short, the legislation said, okay, in those jurisdictions, if a housing, a residential project developer comes to you and they propose as part of their, multi-unit project a certain percentage of affordable units, you city, because you have not made sufficient progress toward, in some cases above moderate and in other cases moderate and below, you shall process that application as a ministerial application. Those projects are exempt from CEQA because CEQA doesn't cover ministerial projects, and the only the only development standards that you can apply are those that are objective, meaning a standard that the applicant could tell just by reading that their project complies with. So you can't apply your design standards that say it has to look nice and fit in with the community. No, that's not an objective standard. So in the rest of the world outside of the coastal zone, jurisdictions are dealing with this steady march toward state level mandates down to really streamlining the approval and review process for housing projects. There are similar movements in the Housing Accountability Act. There was a recent bill in 2019 called SB 330 that kind of approached it more from the planning end and told jurisdictions that they can't start adopting new subjective development standards. Basically, from here on out, you can only be adopting objective ones. And again, because Half Moon Bay is in the coastal zone, most of these statutes provide some form of exemption. For example, SB 35 exempts coastal zone jurisdictions entirely. In other statutes, it's a little bit of a softer provision that says nothing in this statute is intended to do away with anything in the Coastal Act. So Half Moon Bay is anytime you get an application that could be subject to those statutes, there's a bit of a balancing act to figure out, okay, how does the statute fit with our obligations under the Coastal Act? So I think it's a general trend. We're going to see more of it, and I think Jill is wise to be thinking long term, because I think this is the direction that the legislature is going with respect to housing.
Thank you for that, Winter. Very interesting. Any other commissioners' questions or comments? I think in the absence of that, Jill, you are looking for a motion that the Planning Commission acknowledges this report. Would anyone care to make such a, Commissioner Benjamin?
So moved.
Second.
Here a second.
I second.
Commissioner Hernandez, second.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Bridget, if you'll conduct the roll call, please.
Yes, Commissioner Benjamin,
Yes.
Commissioner Gorn,
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Polgar,
Yes.
and Chair Reddick.
Yes,
Acknowledgement is approved.
thank you.
Accepted.
Thank you, and we will come back with talk about housing elements soon.
Sounds good. And the next item on our agenda is the addendum to the Carter Park mitigated negative declaration. Scott, is that the ball in your court then?
Yes, that's correct, Chair Ruddock, Planning Commissioners and committee members. I'll go ahead and share my screen, quick PowerPoint presentation. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes, it looks good.
All right. Okay, so a little background. This is a project that was previously reviewed by the Planning Commission, and the item provides correction and clarification to the description of the project. And a little background: it was reviewed and unanimously approved by the Planning Commission on the 8th of December of last year. And the error is related to the theatrical lighting poles. Within the initial study, it's noted that the lighting poles would be 18 feet in height, whereas the height needed for the poles is actually 30 feet. And then, so this slide provides some clarification on kind of how this happened. the top there, you can see the 15-foot call out. The poles were measured from the top of the concession stand 15 feet, whereas what's needed is 30 feet to the ground of the right next to the stage, sort of the lower portion of the park. So after this was discovered, staff worked closely with the project architect and theatrical lighting consultant and to determine if the theatrical lighting, when actually presented, had the potential to create any additional impact. And the two key topics that were of concern were biological resources as well as its aesthetics. Now, with respect to biological resources, the lighting specialist prepared a photometric lighting plan that's included on this slide. And biologists reviewed the photometric plan and also the plan relative to the lighting threshold within the adopted mitigation measure. This slide includes a photometric rendering or photographic rendering. With respect to aesthetics, the analysis considered the appearance of the light poles relative to the riparian backdrop and within the context of the Stone Pine Shopping Center. Now, this rendering was taken from roughly the patio area in front of the HMB Coffee Co. Within the Stone Pine Shopping Center. And then this is from the other side of the parking lot. And you can see the lighting poles that have been basically photoshopped into the image. Now, in conclusion, both the impact areas that are with the taller light standards will not result in any new impacts that cannot be mitigated to less than significant as previously adopted in the mitigation measures. Now, as far as biological resources, the project biologists concluded that the proposed light poles are within the threshold established in the mitigation measures that were previously adopted, and that the lighting is cut off nearly 100% at the riparian buffer edge. And the lighting wouldn't create any additional impact that wasn't previously analyzed. Now, as a side note, one of the mitigation measures that was previously adopted actually required the preparation of a photometric plan. So we're actually implementing part of the mitigation measures through this process. Now, the environmental consultant, Powers and Associates, reviewed the photo renderings, and they did not identify any impacts related to visual impacts. Primarily with the Stone Pine Shopping Center and surrounding area, and the new lighting poles would be consistent with the built environment in the area. Now, in conclusion, this is very common for a minor change in the description of the project that's previously approved and within a mitigated negative declaration. And as long as there aren't any new impacts that would be created by the minor change in the description, it's very common to use an addendum as a tool to clarify the record that was previously included in an approved project. So in this case, an addendum would be appropriate. I'd be happy to answer any questions. We encourage the Planning Commission to take public comment and provide any feedback.
Thank you, Scott. Do commissioners have clarifying questions at this time? I do not see any hands up.
I believe we lost Commissioner Hernandez for a moment.
Yeah, I was just
I'm
noticing.
gonna, yeah, he was having some speaking or speaker issues. He couldn't hear very well. So let me just see if I can bring him back in.
Here he is.
Hello, I can hear you now.
There you are.
We're just seeing if there are any clarifying questions, Rick.
I had a clarifying question. So with respect to the playground, there's still a plan for a playground with this. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So that has not changed at all. The only real change is the extent of the light poles. That the height above sea level of the actual light fixtures hasn't changed. It's just how they're measured. The height is measured, basically.
Okay, I don't have any other clarifying questions. I just have a comment for discussion that I'll save. All right, thank you.
Commissioner Benjamin. You're muted. Oh, there you go.
Is that better? Am I back?
Yes,
Thank
we
you.
can hear you now.
I apologize for the fact that you can hear me now. The light pole at 30 feet has a longer moment arm. And my only question is to confirm that the foundational structure that's going to hold that 30-foot light pole was actually designed for a 30-foot light pole and not for an 18-foot light pole.
Yes, we absolutely. So we will have geotechnical soils reports that will be provided to our building official when reviewing the building permit plans and structural plans, and absolutely make sure that that meets engineering standards.
Yeah, this is not a place where we want a big light pole to fall on somebody. No other questions. Thank you.
It's a good question. Any others? If there are no other clarifying questions, I'll ask Bridget, do you see any members of the public who may want to comment?
I don't see anyone that wants to speak. No one's raising their hand.
Okay. And we can certainly move to Planning Commissioner's discussion. Would anyone like to discuss? Commissioner Hernandez.
Thank you. So first of all, love the diligence, love the attention to detail, love the fact that we're trying to get everything right. This is going to be amazing. So I'm really excited about where we're going with this. Want to see us move forward with all due haste. With respect to the playground, I had an opportunity to speak with one of the members of the Parks and Rec Committee who happens to live in my household. And, her observation, which I share, is I think about this playground and the space that it's in, and there's some unique attributes. So as we go through and finish the final design, there's a lot of flexibility in how we finally make these things work. I would really seriously consider thinking about that slide apparatus, how it's going to work, taking advantage of the distance you have, the height drop you have, and really doing something thoughtful. City of Palo Alto has a really nice pocket park in the downtown area that the kids love. They go there with cardboard boxes all the time. They're attacking the hill. It's not even that big. But you have an opportunity here to do something really creative, really fun, not too crazy or damaging, but it's something special that could be a real draw. And to quote former Commissioner Brian Holt, good use drives out bad. The more we can make this an exciting place for people to come to, the more we'll have good uses in this park. So just really encourage you guys, just take advantage of this very special location. You can do a lot with this. That's the only comment I have. I just love this project.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Very upbeat. Commissioner Benjamin.
Thank you, Chair Reddick. So I support the amendment. And I feel like this is a really, from a process standpoint, this is really the way it is supposed to be done. In my years as a planning commissioner, I have unfortunately witnessed some cases where a project went through and then mitigations were attached to the project to mollify concerns that were raised. And then after the project went through its appeal period, it went through its coastal commission appeal period. Then the city as applicant came back and removed a mitigation. They didn't change the design. They said, you know, that mitigation, we don't need that mitigation anymore. I think that was an incredible abuse of the CEQA process. I hope we never see it again. And I want to highlight that this way of doing it, which says we are respecting the mitigations that we put into place, and our design change does not reduce our burden to mitigate, is exactly the way that it's supposed to be done. I agree with what Scott wrote, that this is not a significant, or he said, which is that this is not a significant adverse impact visually. I will say that I think it is somewhat adverse to look at, but I don't think it's significant. We're making a decision. We made a decision to make this into a performance space, and we were allowing for a light stand. We understood that going in, and this doesn't change that. And when you look at the photometric picture, you know those things kind of sticking up. Yeah, it's not as beautiful as if they weren't there, but it performs another important function. So for me, it's a no-brainer. I will support the staff resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Benjamin. Any other planning commissioner comments? I'd like to be on the record as 100% supporting Commissioner Benjamin's praise for the process here that staff has worked, and 100% supporting Commissioner Hernandez's enthusiasm for this project. I know a lot of people in town can't wait for this to be a reality. So in the absence of other discussion, we could entertain a motion on the addendum. Commissioner Benjamin?
I move the resolution next in order.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Bridget, would you like to conduct the roll?
Sure. Commissioner Benjamin?
Yes. Wait, yes.
Commissioner Gorn?
Yes.
And Commissioner Hernandez?
Aye.
Vice Chair Polgar?
Yes.
And Chair Reddick?
Yes.
Motion passes 5-0.
Director Ekus.
Yeah, through the chair, we just would like to acknowledge staff and all the work they did on this. Karen Decker from the city manager's office is here tonight. She has been the project manager from developing this project and the public input, and now she's going to be the chief drafter for a grant that we're seeking for this project as well. And then, of course, Scott, you saw his diligence in getting the facts right, the technical studies done. And, you know, we're sorry that we didn't catch this. I sincerely believe if we were at City Hall and those plans had been sitting out in on our planning counter, one of us would have noticed this, but we have been on these little tiny screens, and it just escaped our notice. And we appreciate how welcoming you are and supportive of us in making our mistake in public and fixing it. So thank you for that very much. This is what I expect us to do. And I'm really proud of staff. I don't know if Karen, if you have any questions or comments tonight. You've been hanging out and listening to a housing element report. So thank you for that.
Don't have any questions, but thank you for asking, Jill. I just wanted to say thank you to Chair Reddick and to all the commissioners. You know, I've managed a lot of projects in the past, but this is my first construction project. And so I didn't really know what I didn't know until we were knee deep into things. But this is the first project I've had come before a planning commission. And while Scott and Jill, I mean, definitely carried that effort, and I was just kind of watching from the sidelines, your thoughtful analysis and your questions and your thorough review and ultimate approval just really elevate this project and really give it the integrity that makes this work so meaningful. So I have a 4- and 6-year-old, and my dream is that they can use Carter Park while they're still of an age to do so. So we have a grant due on Friday, and wish us luck. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Karen. And again, I think that staff can be proud of respecting and honoring the process, as Commissioner Benjamin said. So this is a good lesson. And the next item on our agenda, if I remember correctly, is the director's report.
Believe it or not, it is. Thank you. So thank you for this meeting tonight and going through these items. We're going to have a much more tedious time, I think, next in a couple weeks, because we're bringing you the Measure D ratings. We also have a Granada sewer line replacement project. It's a project that was approved quite a few years ago. This is the next phase of it. Doug Garrison is the project planner, and so you will have 2 items that night. And we thank Bridget for this week's packet. We were able to. We're trying to edge back in when we get our packets out. We got this one out Thursday. We're all patting ourselves on the back. Our goal is Tuesdays. We'd like to give you a full week, but right now we're pretty good hanging out at Thursday, and we'll see how we do over the next few months. But we're shooting for Wednesday with the next one, so we'll see how we are. Short-term rental, you had 2 meetings in a row. You had 2 study sessions. We are doing research and preparing to come back for a 3rd study session, and it could be as soon as April 13th. Scott also has a project that appears to be coming up ripe for commission review. It's a new single-family home at 698 Terrace, and that's about as far out as I can forecast for the commission. The City Council will see this housing element report, as I already noted, at their next meeting. I'm working with a developer of the Creekside project at 320 Church Street. This is a subdivision that the commission approved. We're wrapping up an affordable housing agreement to bring to council this spring. And I've got 2 ADUs tomorrow at admin meeting for the department director hearings. I'm just looking at my whiteboard, and it's got a weird shine on it and I can't read it. Okay. So anyway, you've got a lot of busy folks. A little bit more of us are at City Hall now, as we've dialed back to the red tier. We are diligently following all protocols. If you need to come by for any reason, we do have glass up at the front counter, and we can have safe scheduled meetings if you'd like to do that. I have been having Zoom meetings though with folks when you want to meet with us, and we're happy to keep doing that too. So just wanted to let you know that was available. And if you have any other questions for what staff is up to, just let me know.
Thank you, Jill. We appreciate that look down the road at the future meetings. Do planning commissioners have any commissioner communications to share?
I have one.
Commissioner Hernandez.
I've I know about 9 months ago, 6 to 9 months ago, the city removed garbage cans from Poplar Beach. I've had communications with city staff about this. And, we've made a lot of progress on our beaches and making things really tidy down there on Poplar. But can we please get our garbage cans back? I'll also be directing comments to city council next Tuesday, but it would be terrific if city staff could look into that. It's a complaint I get from folks who visit. It's a complaint I have from folks who live here. Would be great if we could do something to address that. And I understood from conversations I've had with Director Dowdy that there were plans in works, but nothing's come to fruition yet. So it's just a comment I have. I know it's not an agenda item, but so we don't all want to pile on. But that's just one piece of feedback I see out in the community.
Thank you, Rick.
Through the chair, I just want to note that that will be agendized before city council as the, not just about garbage cans, but about preparing for the summer months and the high season for beach use. And it's something that staff did last year, and I think even the year before that. And that's coming up really soon. I'm trying to confirm which meeting it's on. I'm not responsible for that report, so I can't remember if it could be as soon as next week. So keep your eyes on the council agendas, and there's going to be a comprehensive update to council.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Good feedback. Any other commissioner communications? Seeing none, shall we entertain a motion to adjourn?
I make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Commissioner Hernandez. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Vice Chair Polgar. Bridget?
Commissioner Benjamin,
Yes.
Commissioner Warren,
Yes.
Commissioner Hernandez,
Aye.
Vice Chair Polgar,
Yes.
and Chair Reddick.
Yes.
Our token pirate.
And
I would do-
8:15. Good job.
I would do the eye thing if I could do it as well as Rick does. Look pathetic in comparison.
Oh,
Well, thank you, everybody.
All right. Bye, guys.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Everyone be well.
Bye.